8:59. Oh, hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. What an exciting night we have planned for you all. My name is Heather Ireland Robinson, and I am the proud and humbled executive director of the Jazz Institute of Chicago. Most of you all know this. We've been nurturing and promoting jazz in Chicago for 52 years. If we were in person, this is where I would make all of our members stand up and do a little dance, and then have them sit down and say, if you didn't have a chance to stand up, wouldn't you like to be a part of our family? Wouldn't you like to make it official? Our members make this kind of programming possible. We believe in, as our title says tonight, keeping the legacy of jazz music alive. Free programs in the communities, whether that's at schools or in parks, are possible because of our members. So take a little time and invest in the future of jazz today. And like we say, make it official. We've got some cool swag this year. So if you're joining us tonight, new members tonight will get a mask, a cool jazz spoken here or keep the music playing mask that we'll send and get out to you. So thank you all for being here and spending a chilly spring night inside, a Chicago night inside with us today. I am thrilled about this panel for so many different reasons. And I have to tell you where the idea came from. So Gerard Harris is a board member of the Jazz Institute of Chicago. In normal times, he runs our jam session at the historic Jazz Showcase. And we all met up at the JEN conference, the Jazz Educators Network conference. Now, we just had a fight about what year it was. It was actually January 2020, but our minds are so crazy. We're like, what was that, 1982? Like, we could not remember the actual year, but it was in 2020. And as happens in conferences, we're New Orleans, everybody's kind of gathering in the bar and making programs and talking about different ideas. And I hope I don't embarrass Gerard by saying this, but Gerard floated up to us. He was about 10 feet off the ground and was like, y'all, talking to our education director, Diane Chandler Marshall, and I, and said, I just realized how many really powerful Black men and women we have in university programs around the country. Like, this is a thing, they're not enough, but the ones we have are really something. And when he said that, I just thought, what an opportunity for us to all get together. That same day, the hotel is situated right in the old Storyville neighborhood of New Orleans. So I'm taking a little walk around, getting all this history, and I look up and there's the Buddy Bolden mural of Buddy there with all the brothers there, you know, playing back in the day, and really the heart of jazz. So I too had, anybody that goes to New Orleans has some kind of a spiritual moment like that. I definitely had mine and wanted to bring that energy to you all today. And I thought, who better to moderate this than Mark Ruffin, who I had the pleasure of meeting backstage at our jazz festivals, right? We're backstage. He's MC for the Chicago Jazz Festival for many years and just having a good time backstage talking jazz. Mark, for those that don't know, he's been in this game for 40 years, playing jazz on the radio. 25 of those years were in Chicago. He's won Emmys. He's a Grammy nominee and has written over 600 magazine articles on jazz and American and African American culture. If I stayed and listed all of his other kudos, we would be here all night. But I thought, what a personality to take some time from the radio. You all can listen to him twice daily. Mark, I'll let you give us your schedule. So welcome, Mark, and he's going to introduce our panel. There will be a Q&A. Put your Q&As in the Facebook chat, and we'll be back. I'll be back to get some of those questions later. But Mark, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Heather. First of all, let me give kudos to Jazz Institute of Chicago. I started to stand up wearing the shirt, very proud. As Heather pointed out, I started in radio in 1980. 1980, I was a volunteer in the west suburbs at WDCB. September 1st, 1980, I got a job at WBEZ, okay? And I was an engineer. In October of 1980, the Jazz Institute of Chicago started a program called Jazz Chicago. The president at the time was Howard Mandel, who is now the president and founder of the Jazz Journalists Association. And it was through Howard Mandel that I got my first paycheck on the air in Chicago through the Jazz Institute of Chicago. So I got to give props to the I see for starting my career. Okay, so this is an incredible panel. The title, Preserving the Legacy, African Americans in Jazz Academia. I think we're very fortunate to even be talking about African Americans in jazz academia. I thought it would be prudent to just introduce each person at a time, and they can tell us a bit about their program, where it is, the type of program it is, and maybe a bit about themselves. Not too long, but a little bit about themselves. And also, I love that many of you folks, many of our panelists have great titles, Director of Jazz Studies, but they also have double titles too. I love that. And we can start with, how about Dr. Joseph Jefferson? He is Director of Jazz Studies and Assistant Professor of Trombone and Euphonium at Southwest Missouri State, is that right?
Southeast Missouri.
Southeast, I'm sorry, I get my... And please tell us where Southeast Missouri State is, please.
Southeast Missouri State, it's in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Maybe about an hour from Carbondale.
Yeah, I remember looking at TV in college, Cape Girardeau, that's right.
Absolutely. Here at Southeast, we have 2 jazz ensembles. This is my 4th year here. When I got here, it was one group with 6. We stood at that first concert. The other group had 11. And I'm glad to say, 4 years later, I got 26 in the first group and 24 in the second group. So it's definitely growing here.
Wow. And how long has your program been in existence before you got there? How long was it in?
I think this program has been here quite a while. There's a really strong jazz festival here that's, I think we're in our 25th year.
Wow.
Of that. So there's definitely some history in terms of that. And, we're just continuing to trying to build upon that and make it better and just really be good stewards of the music and kind of serve our service region and beyond.
I also love the geographical diversity in this group here, Cape Girardeau. I mean, I may be the only person who really know where it is on this panel, but on the other hand, there's a couple of big cities too, including Pittsburgh, where Nicole Mitchell is Director of Jazz Studies and Director of the Creative Arts Ensemble. And she is, like I said, University of Pittsburgh. Tell us a bit about that program, Nikki.
Thanks, Mark. So I'm trying to fill up some really big shoes. The program was started by Nathan Davis 50 years ago. And the next successor was the amazing Jerry Allen. She did an incredible amount of work in the 3 years that she was there. And so those are the footsteps that I'm following in the program. We have a PhD program in jazz studies, and we're actually, since I've arrived, we're rejuvenating the undergraduate program. So a lot of exciting things that I'd love to share with all of you about that. And it's great to see you, Mark, and to connect with JIC because, Chicago's my heart. So great to see y'all.
Yep, Chicago's my heart too. And since we're talking about Illinois, we might as well stay in the state. Northern Illinois University is represented by Reggie Thomas, who is the coordinator of jazz studies there and a wonderful musician. Tell us a bit about that program too, Reggie, please.
Yes, I'm completing my 7th year here at NIU. This is my 3rd college teaching position, but I've been here for 7 years. And I'm just very fortunate that I got to inherit a wonderful program. Was started by Professor Ron Modell many, many moons ago, and he headed up the program for a long time, was affectionately referred to by those folks as the Mode Show. But then the Mode Show gave way to my predecessor and mentor, Professor Ronald Carter, who headed up the program here for, I want to say, it's like the 17 or 19 years that he was here. And so I am trying not to mess it up. It's been storied program for a long time. A number of great guest artists have come out of here. We've had or have come through here. We've had a number of great artists to come through our program. Some of the most recent, the likes of Marquise Hill is a graduate and alum of our program. Nicole Mitchell is an alum of this program, and some young folks that you're going to be hearing about, such as Leonard Simpson, who's a fabulous saxophonist. He finished our program and then went on to the Monk, or now the Herbie Institute. So I'm very blessed to work with some great musicians there. I was very fortunate because I'm the jazz piano professor too, but was very fortunate to start here and still have Willie Pickens on the faculty when I got here. So big shoes to fill, and like I said, I'm trying not to mess it up.
Wow, every time you guys open your mouth, you take me back to my childhood. I'm a product of that public music education system in Illinois. And man, I remember Ron Modell and the NIU Jazz Ensemble. I mean, they had albums. We would buy their records, okay? I still remember the vocalist's name, Lori Luberchain. I mean, Ron Modell had that in the 70s and 80s smoking. So yes, you inherited a hell of a program, Mr. Thomas, absolutely. How about the Harris brothers? I know you guys aren't related, but, and again, the dichotomy between the big city and Purdue University. Let's start with you, Gerard. And Gerard is, you tell us the title and tell us where Purdue is for those who don't know. And also, I had summer band camp, summer '73 at Purdue University.
My name is Jarrard Harris. So my title is a clinical assistant professor of bands. And this is my second year here at Purdue. 5 years before that, I was a lecturer at Northwestern University. Purdue, our music program is different in the sense that Purdue is the one Big Ten school that does not have a music major. So none of the students that we have here are majoring in music. We have a wonderful liberal arts program and a wonderful engineering program. Overall, it's a spectacular college. And we had the luxury of getting a large population of students from the Midwest. And one thing that attracted me to this school is I had been coming here. We just had our 31st annual jazz festival that we have. And, to have never had a music major, we've had 31 jazz festivals where we bring in major guest artists, major clinicians and educators to adjudicate bands. And all the students that we have in the bands, we have over 30 performing musical organizations. In the jazz department, we have 6 jazz big bands. And in a normal year, we're from 3 to 4 small jazz ensembles. And none of these students are majors. They're all here because they just want to play. And so, it's by the grace of God that we have some kids that went to some really good schools and went in some really good programs. And I used to even teach in the northern suburbs because I still live in Chicago. I commute. But we would have students who would say, oh, I want to be an engineer or I want to be an astronaut. And I would tell them, man, you go to Purdue, you can still play in a band, and play with some really happening kids, and you can be an astronaut or an engineer. And so that's what we do here. So we don't have a music major. They're thinking about trying to get one started, but we have a great desire in the sense that we have a lot of students that want to play. And so again, this is my second year here.
That's an amazing story. We'll dig into that a bit later. And let's go to the other Harris brother, the legendary Stefan Harris, please.
Well, first of all, so good to see you as always, Mark. And although Gerard and I don't share the same mother and father, he is definitely my brother. We have been friends for many, many years. I've learned a great deal from him, and we've had some incredible, inspiring conversations. And I'm a fan of everybody on this screen right now. In terms of a program that I would describe, I would tell you about my journey a little bit, and that my real passion ever since I was a child has been for education. I love to play music, I love to write, but fundamentally there's nothing that brings me greater joy than unlocking potential in others. And I love the challenge of someone throwing a question at me that I can't answer. I always say, I'll be back next week and I will have that answer. So I was at NYU for about 15 years or so. I was a director of curriculum development at the Brubeck Institute. I've worked at the Hancock Institute, the Monk Institute. My most recent position was as Associate Dean and Director of the Jazz Arts Department at Manhattan School of Music. So I ran that program for a while. And currently, I'm at Rutgers University in Newark, New Jersey. And the reason that I am there is that my dedication to this art form is from a perspective of the big picture cultural assets that are embodied at the center of it. This is an art form that is all about empathy. It is all about the science of listening, quieting the ego, and understanding what's happening around you first, so that you can understand the context in which you hope to contribute ideas. So for me, I wanted to specifically be in an environment that was a reflection of me, of my children, of my nana, my aunties, my cousins. So while I was at Manhattan School, I live in New Jersey, every day I would drive past the city of Newark to go into New York to teach. And I just felt that I needed to make sure that I was doing something in my own community. Now, I was always engaged in Newark for a long, long time. I've been in this area over 20 years. I'm also the artistic advisor for jazz education at the New Jersey Performing Arts Center. But what I'm doing now is I'm at a public university, which is so amazing. And I am working with a cadre of non-musicians. My first class was about 30 students in a theory class, and basically none of them played music, and I loved it. Out of the 30, 29 of them were people of color and women. So I was just, from the start, like, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. I am not about elitism. I am about imparting the power of empathy and the compassion that's embodied in our music to the masses of people, because that's our real value. It's not just about being able to play instruments well. I think we carry a message that's going to help unite us as a nation. It just happens to be packaged beautifully in this art form. So I'm focused right now as an educator on imparting that message in the classroom and beyond.
And what school did you say, Stefan?
Rutgers University in Newark, New Jersey.
Now, I thought you said now we could talk for 4 hours about the jazz history of Newark, New Jersey. Okay.
Oh, yes.
Well, I mean, it's forever. Okay. But beyond that, Rutgers is also one of those schools that has a great respect for jazz and a long history. Now, is that right as well?
Oh, absolutely. Well, the city of Newark, I believe art is local. Right? The idea is that it's ultimately a manifestation of the hopes and dreams and aspirations of the people, right? So in order to have a successful program, you really want to be articulating the culture of that community. So for me, the city of Newark, when you start to look at the people who came from that city, Wayne Shorter, Sarah Vaughan,
Woody Shaw,
James Moody, I mean, the list goes on and on. Yes. Now, here's the interesting thing is that it is a city beyond just the arts. It is a city that understands the big picture value of the arts. It is deeply invested in the arts because they understand that it's essential to have a thriving artistic community if you're going to revitalize a city. Even the mayor of Newark right now is Ross Baraka, right? I mean, the son of Amiri Baraka, an amazing
jazz people, right?
Yeah, so it's just like, I got to tell you, I've never been happier in my life. And it's a fascinating move to go from the large institutional structures to decide to just come, instead of trying to pull students into the other programs, I decided to go to where the students were and give from the heart in that environment.
Now, again, dichotomy here is we go to Mr. Phillips, who is at the University of Iowa. He is the associate professor of African American studies as well as into jazz. And Mr. Phillips, you're not in New York City or Pittsburgh, but in Iowa City. Want to talk a little bit about your situation, your program?
Yeah, you are correct in that we are not in NYC or another major metropolitan area of that sort. But one of the beautiful things that has worked out about me being in Iowa is that I've been enabled since taking over our program. I've run it for the last 2 years. And since taking it over, I've been enabled to start to put together something that gives us the ability to try to approximate that holistic cultural experience that pairs with the music in the middle of rural Iowa. You know, I am a huge proponent of not just talking about the notes and the pitches and the scales and the chord scale relationships and yada, yada, yada. That all is contextual information. Those are all tools to be implemented in something greater than us, greater than, you get what I mean? It's the music is more than the sum of its individual parts. And I think that that's one of the faults of the music, is that it's taught that way all the time. And then we end up having to undo that. But one of the beautiful parts about my program is that my school has been pretty respectful in terms of giving me the resources to put something together, where basically I've allowed to kind of build the program as I see fit. And I'm proud to say that as of the fall of this year, our faculty of 4 is 75% African American. Who would have thought that in the middle of rural Iowa? So we are trying to, we can't change our geography. It is what it is. But at the same time, there's something about Iowa that I was meant to do. I was hired to about 4 or 5 other jobs. And one tiny thing happened that derailed. And so my first job was in Grinnell College, at a tiny liberal arts college about an hour away from here.
Also,
and
the alma mater of Herbie Hancock. Let's make sure
that is correct, sir. That is correct. Got to meet him too. But anyway, one day we'll have another conversation about that. And sure enough, the University of Iowa hired me away about 5 years after taking that job, and forced me to get into the African American studies side of it too, which has been a beautiful experience, so that it's not just talking about hardcore technical music stuff, but having to explain and help nurture an understanding of the culture as a whole, and how the music and the culture fit together in a way that has an impact on people who are, knee deep in the music all day, every day, and people who don't play. And hoping that understanding helps them get a broader, the real power and the real potential of what the music represents.
So you have general study programs that people can get into with African American history and maybe music mixed into the curriculum?
Yeah, that's part of what I teach. I teach the music classes. Our African American Studies department is a bit unusual. Everyone in the program has a dual appointment. So communications and African American Studies, English African American Studies, sociology African American Studies, and I happen to be the music colleague. So all of the classes that the African American Studies area offers in music is my responsibility. So it's a beautiful mixture, both internally as a faculty, kind of a think tank, a place to bounce off ideas, but it works out really well in terms of curricular offerings too.
Very nice. And Ms. Mitchell, Nicole, you are, what's your title? Director of Creative Arts Ensembles? What does that mean?
This was one of the first projects I put together. I've been here. This is going into my second year, so 6 months, then COVID, unfortunately, but still trying to do what we do. Creative arts, I wanted to bring together other artists, not just improvisers, but those that do visual arts, those that do film, those that do poetry, and come together and create music central, but like having these other aspects and making interdisciplinary projects is something that's really exciting to me about the music, is that it really is so resonant with bringing together and having a message and using all of these art forms as a collaboration. And so the students really got excited about that. There hadn't been anything like that offered. So this is like my first project that I worked on coming here. Now we have the jazz seminar, which has been going on for 50 years now. That's like one of the major pieces of our program, is a whole week of intensive workshops and performances for the community. And I know, Stefan, I know you've been there I think either Jerry or Nathan or both have brought you there previously. So I'm excited to continue that, but also I'm really looking at what I'm really excited about is trying to develop this new venue that the university is helping support that will really create another space for listening to the music in the community, and like making a space for local jazz musicians to perform. It's not a big space, but it's a space that can help innovation and help people develop their projects, and come together, So that's one of the things I'm working on.
Well, a university is huge resources for, I mean, if you're out in the middle of nowhere, again, I'm thinking my own college experiences, being in Carbondale, having a nice jazz club or having a university use their resources to help the community. Any of you guys have any examples of that, maybe in DeKalb or maybe in Cape Girardeau? Mr. Jefferson, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Here, actually, there's a gentleman that started this Italian restaurant, and now he opened up. I don't know if you all ever seen Gone Girl, the movie Gone Girl. That was actually filmed here. So the bar, he's actually purchased that, and so now every Friday he wants jazz. Every Friday and Saturday he has live jazz. And so I'm playing there every Friday. So now it's having the opportunity to do that. And just things I never thought would happen when I moved here. I moved here and met an older bunch of jazz musicians. And I find out that the clarinet player used to play with Benny Goodman, and the trombone player used to play with Dorsey. And so, and I'm like, they're up there. And so when I got there and they showed me my first trad jazz, it was like, well, you can't play those bebop lines over this. That's not gonna quite work like that. So they had to like give me the education on like playing traditional jazz, which is a whole different type of scene. So being here on the Mississippi, all of those boats come and they dock here, and people go down to New Orleans. So there are little pockets of things here, and we're just very fortunate here because we're the only university in Missouri with a dedicated campus for the arts. So we're not attached to the main campus. It's just all the arts are right here. So we got music, we got dance, we got music theater. They got their dorms, they got practice rooms on the same, they can walk out in their PJs and go practice from their room. So it's like you don't have an excuse to not be shed, So there's definitely a little, some gems here and that you really wouldn't expect to see, in a small area like Cape Girardeau.
And what about DeKalb? I mean, I know we're talking COVID and everything, but pre-COVID, Reggie, what was DeKalb like?
Of course, DeKalb is just the musical and cultural mecca of the Midwest, right? Chicago is one of the suburbs to DeKalb, right? Well, of course not. We're in the cornfields, and that was by design. That's what universities used to do. They wanted to set their schools up in remote places so that students would be there without distraction. So we get a lot of these programs that are in small little agricultural towns, but that's actually always been one of the positive things about studying jazz music that is so inherently different than any other course of music study, in that we do develop a gig culture in the town. Any town that has a jazz program is going to develop some type of gig culture, because all of our performances are not simply what is in the concert hall. And when we do our fall and our spring concert here, as a matter of fact, I remind our students that if the majority of the playing that you're doing is in your school concerts, you're not playing anywhere near enough. So it's embedded and built into our programs. Our combo program exists on weekly jam sessions that are run at a local venue, so that we are getting into the community. I have to give a shout out to, for years we were in the House Cafe. I'm sure Nicole remembers that, doing the jam sessions in the House Cafe, or even taking student recitals or our combo fest to there. This past year, pre-COVID, we were in a local place called Fatty's, and it was great because they had a great room in the back where we could be. And it's been at different places throughout the city, but those types of relationships are made with the community that you're in, and you're also teaching your young people about being entrepreneurs, about how to get out there and talk to restaurant owners and club owners. So there's been many venues that have supported what we've done and that we have supported what they've done. As a matter of fact, one that I started since I've been here, there's an old theater called the Egyptian Theater that harkens back to the days of silence and all of that. So you still have the ornate organ in there and everything. But we've started a Jazz at the Egyptian series that runs every year that pairs my jazz orchestra and the jazz bands from the two local high schools, the Calb High School and Sycamore High School, so that we're building community that way and supporting local business. It's just part of what we do in jazz education.
Stefan?
Yeah, I have to tell you, I don't think it's possible for us to build a sustainable model for our art form without leveraging the power of institutions. We all have to do that. That's part of the dance. The challenge is finding institutions that have shared vision and shared value with the ambitions that you have, that you want to impart. So I can tell you, Rutgers Newark has been amazing. Rutgers Newark is the home to the Institute of Jazz Studies. The executive director is a brilliant brother by the name of Wayne Winborn, also a big brother and mentor for me. That's the largest archive of jazz in the world. They also have a jazz club that they started in honor of Clement Price, who is one of the leading scholars of African American studies, particularly around the state of New Jersey. This club at the university is completely free to the public. The musicians are paid well. We bring in people from Gerard has played there, right? We bring in people from all over the country to play there. But for the audience, for the community, the whole purpose of it is that our chancellor wanted to change this institution from being a citadel on the hill and open it up to the community. So they started a jazz club and allowed people to come in for free. Not only is the music free, but there's food, there's drinks, there are all these amazing events that happen. So that's Clem's place. And that's one example of leveraging the power of an institution. But as you take a step back and view the greater ecosystem, you realize that you have the NJ-PACT, New Jersey Performing Arts Center, you have WBGO, you have the Grammy Museum, Rutgers University, they're all walking distance. So one of the things that we did during COVID, which was really fantastic, is we had our development teams from Rutgers University and NJ-PACT work together. We ended up getting a multi-million-dollar grant from the Mellon Foundation and created a jazz and poetry series. So we created a summer camp. We're getting ready to film a movie about Willie the Lion Smith, who is from Newark. But this is because we're leveraging the power of these institutions. It would be very difficult to get this type of work done without understanding the importance of working with the larger ecosystem.
I would like to pivot a bit and talk about your own personal journeys and your aspirational journeys. As you know, was it always education and institutional versus, I mean, we have two stars here, people who I know could go out and make a living if pre-COVID touring. That's Stefon and Nicole, and congratulations to Nicole Mitchell, who was nominated for Flute Player of the Year for the Jazz Journalists Association. And you know, did you always want to do this? Who were some of your role models to get you into education versus performing, or, you know, just a little bit of your own journey? And we can start with Mr. Harris, Gerard. I forgot this too. That's right, Gerard.
I think like any kid growing up in the 80s and 90s, for one, in Louisville, Kentucky, it was rare to, you know, jazz. There was a history of it in the past, but, you know, my generation wasn't that into it. So one of the main reasons I went to the high school I went to was because they were the only high school that had a jazz band. And, you know, I just wanted to play. And I think like many young people, my dreams was, man, I want to be Wynton Marsalis. I remember looking at the Cosby Show and seeing the picture of Wynton Marsalis on Theo Huxtable's wall. And I was like, man, I want to play in jazz clubs and jazz festivals and tour the world playing, And so, I went to school, got my undergraduate at the University of Cincinnati. Then I moved to Chicago and went to DePaul for graduate school. And, it was a nice scene where, I played, met some of the older generation and got to play in some great performing situations. And part of my just living in Chicago was like, well, I had an apartment. It was like, how am I going to pay the rent? So one day I had worked at this saxophone shop in the northern suburbs, and they used to rent instruments to schools in those northern suburbs. And they knew all the band directors. And so my whole thing was like, okay, well, maybe if I teach a couple lessons, I can make, my rent easier. And so it just happened to be, the right place at the right time to where these dominoes kind of started falling, where I went to one school and it's like, oh, well, another high school in the same district needs a saxophone teacher too. And so therefore I started teaching. And while it started off as like a rent project, to be honest, it was like, I enjoyed it, so it was like, I kind of look forward to, different people coming in, where it's like I had a wide variety of students. And so it was like, it forced me to be able to have to be able to address people on different levels. So it's like, everybody's not going to be like me. Some people have much more experience than I did when I was their age. And so I really enjoyed it. And I found a great mentor a lady by the name of Mary Jo Pavich. She was one of the founders of the Jazz Education Network. And I was teaching at a high school where she was the fine arts director. And she just heard me practicing one day. And she was like, who are you? I didn't know you were here. And, you need to come to my office. And it became this relationship of, literally she would do things at other schools and universities. And she'd be like, I can't really make this one this week. How about you go in my place? And it was kind of like trial by fire almost kind of deal. And, those things that I started doing, I really enjoyed teaching. It was like, I enjoyed talking. It's like, talking to folks, and like, it was that kind of vibe. And I was still playing and whatnot in Chicago. So it was almost like I had the best of both worlds. So I wasn't, necessarily signed to Columbia Records or Blue Note, making records and whatnot. But I still had what I enjoyed doing, which was playing. And I found that I was, really good at communicating with, people, not just young people, but people in general. And so my whole thing in college, like I said, teaching at universities was like luck, where I played in a band called the Chicago Jazz Ensemble that was run by Bill Russo, who was famous for writing for Stan Ken's orchestra. And we had all this music, like original, transcriptions of Ellington and whatnot. So I learned about a bunch of different kinds of music. And one of the guys in the band, Scott Hall, was on the faculty at Columbia College. And I had done like an educational workshop for the Chicago Jazz Ensemble. And he was like, I really like the way, you ran that workshop and taught. Would you like to teach a class at Columbia? Sure. That was my first college teaching experience. I played in the Sunday jam sessions with Perez Whitted at Andy's Jazz Club in Chicago every Sunday night. One night I'm playing in there and Victor Goins comes in and says, I got a class, would you like to teach a class? He was director of jazz studies at Northwestern. He was like, he heard me play, and I had met him before, in other situations, but it was like a long time. And he literally was the right place and the right time and knowing the right person. He was like, would you like to teach this class here? And then by that time, I had been coming to Purdue already as part of that jazz festival that I talked about, listening to bands adjudicating and playing and whatnot. And it was just kind of like, it was like work, for me. It was like, the work of it was like, I feel like I made, being in the right place at the right time, but also making what happened for me happen. So like, I can almost say that most folks on the panel probably know, it's like, man, they probably got an email from me at some time saying, hey, could you tell me about how this works? Or how do you get in with this particular scene of people? Or how can I make this particular connection? And it literally became this, the art of, learning the dance of, man, it's who you know. I tell my students all the time, it's who you know and how you present yourself and make things happen for yourself. So being here at Purdue, while we don't have music, or we don't have that part of my teaching for them, it's like, man, yeah, you had a great engineering school, but how are you going to be? They want to be that great engineer or astronaut, just like I wanted to be that Blue Note jazz musician. And I was like, man, you know, you got to make it happen for yourself. How are you going to make it happen? What's going to be your plan? What are you going to do? This is what I did. This is how I arrived here. And so I guess they're like passions. One was like what I always wanted to do, play. And then the other one was one that I learned as I went along. And everything that happened for me was part of the process.
In a way, your story sounds like me. Your talent pulled you by the nose. You know, you didn't have a plan, but it's wherever you land. But you make your own luck too. You were prepared every time luck knocked on your door, because luck will walk away if you ain't ready. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And let's shout out that high school, Mary Jo Pavich. She's an amazing woman. That would be Highland Park High School. Would that be it?
Highland Park High School is where it was, yeah.
Oh man, she's an amazing human. Please, yes. Yes, great. That's wonderful. How about anybody else want to talk about their journey, where they go, Mr. Thomas?
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, Gerard, because so many of our stories are stories of serendipity like that, of being in the right place at the right time, and this happens and that happens. And though I'm very thankful for that, at the same time, I think it points to our responsibility, and sometimes how we don't care for that responsibility of nurturing people and mentoring them to go this direction. Because I was never in my education mentored or taught about this is the path to this. I never was. It was very much serendipity, and many of us are not, because I hate to say it this way, but I can't find a kinder way to say it. We weren't meant to be in this space, right? I happened to go to a high school that had one of the best jazz programs in the country, and that was Lincoln High School in East St. Louis, Illinois. One of the things that I had to hear every day of every year that I was there was, this is where Miles graduated. I had to hear it every day. You can't be half-stepping like that. This is where Miles graduated. So that's what I came up with through high school. And that was actually a lot of my foundational education about jazz. It wasn't necessarily my college education about jazz, because where I went off to do my undergraduate work, there was not a jazz program. There were 4 jazz bands, and they fell under the auspices of the band program. So it was just like, there's concert band and wind symphony, and then there's 4 jazz bands. But there was no jazz program. We could not take a course in improvisation. There was no jazz arranging. There was no jazz pedagogy. There was no jazz history. None of that in my undergraduate experience. However, it was a very strong music education program. And when I actually was not a music education major or a music major at first, and I'm only mentioning this because it came up in a conversation we were having earlier. What our people told us, guidance counselors and parents, these are the fields you should go into because that's how you're going to be able to feed your family. Here's where the money is going. So I was a computer science major, even though I've known my entire life, as long as I can recall having a memory, that I was a musician. I've known that forever, even before I could make one note of music. I knew I was a musician. So I was a computer science major, finished my first year of college. And after applied calculus 1 and calc 2, I said, what the heck are you doing? You know, because I'm trying to be in this calc class at 8 o'clock in the morning, the night after I played a club gig in town, and rarely made it to that class on time, and knew that I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. So I majored in music, and I'm only giving that as part of the story because my majoring in music helped develop me as an educator, and helped prepare me to be able to teach public school, which is what I thought I would do for a couple of years, to go back home, give back to my community and teach where I grew up, and then go out and have my life in music. But no one ever at any point in time said to me, hey, you could have a career as a college professor. The serendipitous part for me was a former colleague of mine and one of my best friends, Rick Hayden, who was teaching at Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville when I was playing around the St. Louis area. and he would hear me play, and he knew me from when I was in high school, and he approached me because the university realized we don't have enough people of color as faculty at our university. So they developed a program that was a minority recruitment and retention program. And that program was, if you find some people that you want to hire, and even if they don't have the qualifications yet, we will create an assistantship for you to give to them, and then fund their employment for the first 2 years. And then you all have to figure out how it's going to come out of your budget. And that's how I got my first teaching gig. I was smart enough to not say no. He came to me and said, hey, we want to create an assistantship to get you your master's, to hire you. And I went straight into teaching that way, never had to interview for that first job. That's a wonderful story, and it's a great story, and it started me on my path, but it shouldn't have to happen like that. We need to be teaching students and mentoring people about how to go this direction, and even offering this as an option.
It is a great example, but on the other hand, talking to Nikki and Stefan, you guys, I mean, there has to be an original burning desire to be a performer. What made one of you to get into education and not concentrate on performing so much, Nikki?
Well, I started with Jimmy Cheatham at UCSD, used to play in the Count Basie Orchestra, and then I left there and went to Oberlin and was blessed to work with Donald Byrd and then Wendell Logan. Then I dropped out of there and ended up at Chicago State because I felt like I could learn more in this city than I was learning, you know, in the university. And I did that for a while, and I was in a practice room, and that's where I met Roxanne Stevenson, who still teaches at Chicago State University. And she was like, "What are you doing in here? Why aren't you in school?" and meeting her and connecting with her was really, for me, where the light came on, like, oh, I could do this. She was trying to have me teach high school, but I was like, no, I want to do what you do, you know. And that was for me, that was my moment for wanting to teach in the university. It was definitely a struggle. You know, I taught at UIC in Chicago as an adjunct. I taught at Wheaton College. You know, I taught, did part-time at NIU. I was part-time everywhere in the city of Chicago, every university there is. And it wasn't until UC Irvine actually gave me an offer to be a tenure track, to go to Orange County, California, where jazz, to teach there in integrated composition, improvisation, and technology. So coming to Pittsburgh, in a sense, is like coming home, because it's coming back to something familiar, to even though it's East Coast, it has a little bit more of that Midwest feel for me, and the very strong jazz community that's the university is connected to. So yeah, I've always wanted to do this, and it's been a long journey. And like you said, like Reggie, you said, it's like it wasn't necessarily set up, you know, for you to go to get here, but you know, we have the intent and we get here, and everyone has a different journey.
Wow, Nikki, I'm kind of surprised, because your performing career, at least from the outside, seems to, you know, have potential and touring and all that. I mean, did that ever draw you away from the original idea of wanting to be an educator?
No, I always wanted to.
Wow.
I always wanted to teach, and I like performing and touring, but I actually don't like being gone a long time. I'm a mother. I was a single mother, and I didn't want to be gone all the time. You know, I wanted, and I feel that people have been generous with me. I want to be able to give back, and also want to be able to support other musicians, my peers. And if you don't got no bread, you can't do that. You can't, you know what I'm saying? So I just, it was something that I've always, for a long time, had a passion for.
You bring up two other issues, being a woman, one, and family versus the, touring and playing. And I think Mr. Harris' family might have a bit to do with the pull of education. I'm not sure, but you tell me, Stefan.
Oh, of course, it's all wrapped up together. But I gotta tell you, I'm an educator through and through. Like, that is the passion of my life. I have thousands of pages of notes over there on my desk, and 90% of it is garbage. It's just me exploring how to take complex concepts and reduce them in a manner in which I can deliver it and unlock potential. I absolutely love it. I always have. And I would say to anyone who's thinking about being a teacher, unless you wake up dreaming about it, don't do it. Okay? Because our kids deserve people who are passionate. They deserve real educators. This is not a side hustle. It takes a tremendous amount of heart, soul, compassion, and love to be an educator. So I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And for me, performing is an extension of that. It's all wrapped together. If I were not playing, I don't think I would be able to articulate the experience. What helps me as an educator is I try a myriad of possibilities. I mean, I've worked on every little finger, every possible. I spent 3 years just looking at triads. I'm kind of a theory nerd. But then when I come across a student, most likely I've probably been down that path and found what was on the other end. So I can let you walk that way because I've seen it. I'm not going to tell you not to do it, but I'm going to give you a little guidance along the way. So for me, it's just the most beautiful experience. I'm never more alive, other than when I'm with my family. I'm never more alive than when I'm in the classroom.
Wow, I'm really shocked, dude, because you had your career going on, and I've seen you perform and seen the passion and all of that. I mean, if it came back, I mean, would you go back ever to the level you were at again and walk away from education?
So I don't see the divide. So for me, when I'm in the, like, my overall mantra is I'm dedicating my time on this planet to the proliferation of empathy through the arts. That's what I'm trying to do. So when I'm in the classroom, everything that I'm doing is about empathy. I'm teaching people how to listen, and then I'm giving them the mechanical tools of music in order to respond to the world that they're perceiving. The apps that I've developed, Harmony Cloud, is an ear training app. It's about teaching people to listen. When I'm on stage, the point of what it is that we're doing is, my brothers, we come together and we jump courageously into the unknown, right? We don't know what's going to happen. We have so much love, trust, and respect between us. We demonstrate the value of vulnerability on stage. We're teaching a lesson in our own actions when we play. And when I'm in a corporate environment, it's the same idea. So everything that I do is about teaching.
Wow, very nice. We do have some questions coming in from some folks, but I want to get to the journeys of Mr. Phillips and Mr. Jefferson. Either one of you guys jump right on in.
Yeah, it was a little interesting for me because I really got started in the church, listening to my mom sing, and I had a trombone that was bigger than me, and I was up there in Virginia, and actually Purdue, Virginia, real small town. Okay, and so that kind of really pushed me to go to school, and I knew for undergrad, I knew I wanted to go to school at a HBCU just because of, some of the teachers that I had, but I just was not prepared for the experience that I received there because I had just some phenomenal teachers and they did not take any junk. They held me accountable, and so when I got out of line and I didn't do what I needed to do, they was just saying, hey, your parents are, investing a lot in you, to do this. So they really held me accountable. And so mentorship became extremely huge for me at that point. And then I started being very intentional about how I kind of did my, my career, if you will, and how I wanted to kind of do things. I saw teachers that looked like me that really made a difference. and really help people, really save some people from themselves. And so I knew that that was something that I wanted to do. And so, you know, as I matriculated on to Shenandoah Conservatory, I knew that they had Army blues teachers there. And so I could understand that piece and work with Brian Kidd, who was the, you know, composer and arranger of the Navy band. And so I was very intentional about that. And then when I went on to West Virginia, I was very intentional about that because I wanted to study with Keith Jackson, because he played both jazz and classical. And so that was important because he was also a mentor to me and still is. And so I try to model some of the things that I'm doing in terms of how I work with students. And the one thing that kind of did it for me when I went there and I got my doctorate, he said, my job's not done until you get tenure. And so when somebody says that to you, that's kind of like, you know, you're invested in that person. You know, and I looked at him, I said, hey man, I'm almost there. And, you know, he's, you know, been to my wedding and, you know, been there for me all of my life. So just having really good mentors to kind of help me and really ask for advice, you know, like you said, there's not many of us in this field. I'm the only one. I'm the only African-American in the, you know, music department here. And most of us have to deal with that. So we have to understand how to navigate the landscape. And so it's extremely important to have a sense of community and have other people that you can kind of bounce things off. And that's kind of how I kind of landed here. And I'm very thankful for it, that I can work with students that are like me, not necessarily Black students, but students that come from different socioeconomic backgrounds, but have a desire and a drive to want to learn. And they really just need somebody that's going to help push them and help them get to the next level. And in terms of the performance piece, you know, we're all healers. And that's the new thing that I'm telling my students, you know, what you do matters. And so when you're at the point and you feel as though you're just doing this to do this, then this isn't the group for you to be in, because right here, we're trying to convey a story. We're trying to educate audiences, and we're trying to make an impact and really reach people. And so we have to use the thing that we do, just like Stefon was saying, using having the performance being a vehicle. Absolutely, they work together, and it's just finding that sweet spot and what works for you, because it's really not one size fit all.
Very cool. We got some questions coming in, but again, we want to get to Mr. Phillips and talk a bit about your journey. And I mean, it sounds like most of you folks, education was always there as part of what you wanted to do, as well as performing. What about you, Mr. Phillips?
Yeah, I'll make this quick. I know we got other things to go on to. So my background's a little weird in that in the beginning, I didn't play a lick of jazz. I was entirely classical music all the way through until 2000, at which point I decided to take a few years off of schools, because I think, especially on the classical side, but academics in general tend to shotgun their degrees, go from one to the next, and not actually live life. And there is actually something lost if you go about it in that way. And so I made it a conscious decision to stop. And I'm glad I did, because over the course of that time, I discovered that I was pursuing the wrong thing and just didn't know it yet. And so kind of stumbled into jazz on the groove and fell in love with it. And so I tried to maintain both for a time, but as it turns out, I was not cut to juggle both of those balls simultaneously. And so I stopped trying and pursued the path that I, at least in my mind, thought that I was meant to be on. And so I got a master's in classicals and switched and got a second master's in jazz, because I didn't know anything about jazz at all when that decision was made. And I knew I was going to teach from the beginning. That's always been my goal from the rip. I checked out secondary teaching in the beginning and found out the hard way that was not my bag. And rather than fight that, I ran with it, and you know what I mean, and decided that I was going to teach at the college level. And so got a second master's in jazz and then got a doctorate from University of Colorado. And I, along the way, knew I was going to teach college. And so I paid really close attention to the inner dynamic of collegiate environments. I took very careful note of the ins and outs and the pitfalls and the systemic things that are in place in that system that work against you. I knew that those were coming. And when they did, I wanted to make sure that I saw that bullet before it left the barrel. That worked out to be great, but and I've had some really foul stuff happen to me as I climbed that ladder. I'll be really blunt with you about it. We don't have to go into detail on it. Some real foul stuff, but got through it in one piece. And so ended up teaching at Grinnell College, then got hired away by Iowa from there. But yeah, I knew that I was going to teach. And I'm very glad that Stefan made the distinction between, made it clear that performing and teaching are not separate entities. In my mind, they are absolutely integrated with each other. And you are an absolute fraud in trying to do one if you are struggling or not willing to immerse yourself 100% in the other. Not that you're espousing hollow, regurgitating learned information that has nothing to do with practical experience. I think at the very core of the Black music experience is that lived experience with what it is you're talking about, not that, memorized and repeated on command type stuff. And making sure that our students understand that, internalize it personally, and then they can make their decision. That's how I look at it. I don't care what color my students are or what their background is. I want you to understand the music as completely as possible, from top to bottom, from left to right. And then when you finish your program or your time together with me, you go on and you make your own decision. But I want to make sure that the decision you make is an informed one, and that the next decision you make is not because you don't know any better. You understand it completely.
Guys, there's so many directions we could go on. I mean, because you just preached and took us a lot of places.
I'm sorry.
No, man, it was wonderful, Dr. Phillips. Please, it was wonderful. And we could go on for another hour on just some of the topics you talked about, what you guys have gone through, role models, mentoring. And I thought, we should talk more about that, but the questions are headed towards the students. So let's please the audience. One question is, why is it, oh no, this is a good one. Why is it important for African Americans to have roles like yours in higher education? Anyone?
I'll start in there, and it will maybe allow me to ask Damani what I wanted to ask from what you just talked about. But I'll start just because I've probably been at this longer than most on the panel, in that my first college teaching job I started in 1992 full time. So I've been almost 30 years teaching at the college level. And as I mentioned in kind of my origin story, I had someone to reach out to me while I was teaching elementary school in Plain and saying, hey, we want you to come and work on your master's. And they actually had reached out to me and another good friend of mine who was an amazing musician, saxophonist, Gerald Declue. And their plan was to hire both of us together. And unfortunately, during the time that we were in school, Gerald was killed tragically in a car accident. So they did follow through with me. I bumped my head so much as a young faculty member, and especially as a young faculty member of color, because I didn't have anyone to mentor me through the process. And you got to look at also, jazz education has been around for a minute now, but it's still relatively young by comparison to everything else. And was still the stepchild in many ways. So how we were looked upon in the jazz education area. I mean, I can remember auditioning for college and the piano teacher asking me, so are you going to play jazz or are you going to play some real music? That we're still dealing with that perception and having no one to mentor you along that path. Because of that, and by the time I left Southern Illinois at Edwardsville, I was one of the only tenured, fully promoted Black professors at that university. So there were a few people that were upset that they let me go. I took my tenure and rank to Michigan State with me, and at NIU I'm tenured and I'm a full professor here. that is rarer, right? And we don't necessarily have people to mentor us through that process of what we need to be doing. So I've always taken it up on myself to seek out young professors, and I just unofficially become their mentor. I was on tour with the Basie Band, and there was a young brother, trumpet player, Dr. James Ford, who was on that tour with us. And at the time, I think he was going up for promotion. So I just sat next to him on the bus and said, okay, let's talk. I'm a resource for you. Let's talk about service work. Let's talk about, okay, well, give me an idea of what you're doing to update your Vita. All of the things that we need to be mentored about that I never got as an undergraduate student and in my early days of teaching. That's one of the main reasons that we need to be there in these positions. And I'll yield time for some other folks to talk about that.
Anybody else want to comment on that question? Stefan?
Yeah, I would say it's I think the bigger question in terms of why is it important for us is what is the value proposition of the art form itself, of the culture, right? It's not about us as individuals, right? But when we look at what spawned this art form, we are a people that are the children of people who were brought to this country from a myriad of other locations, speaking a myriad of languages, different religions, who didn't necessarily come together and melt into one unique culture. We had to figure out a way of singing our own truths. What gave birth to the need for an art form like this is the idea that someone was telling you, this is how you're allowed to express yourself, right? This is what you're allowed to say. So if you were to stand up and say, I'm educated, I love this person, you could be killed for learning how to read, right? So the one time that you would have been able to express your authentic truth would have been in church. Would have been when you were able to come together and as a community in isolation and stand up and let go, to really, that one moment. And if that was all you had all week, you better believe you were going to stand up and sing your truth, right? And that congregation was going to sit around and support you and say amen and say, that's, we got you 100%. And then you were going to sit down in the congregation and you were going to listen and support someone else. So this is an art form that is ultimately, in its DNA, is the blueprint for the solution of how you deal with disparate perspectives, right? What we're struggling with right now as a society. We have people from all over the world, different cultures, and we're not listening to each other. If you want to empower a citizenry that is creative, that is compassionate, that knows how to sit still, quiet the ego, listen, understand the context, and then project an idea in service of the whole. There's no greater art form that does that. And what I'm talking about right now is cultural. You cannot just take the scales and get the message that I'm talking. Music is a practice. You have to live this. So why is it important that we are here? My mother's a Pentecostal minister, like my brother Jefferson over there. You know what I mean? I grew up in the church. It's not something that I read in a book. I've lived this. Being Black in America, my heart is broken every single day. I mean, with the young sister who was shot today, this is on my mind. I desire that American dream. This is part of the value that why we need an immigrant population here, because a lot of times immigrants latch on to that American dream, that idealistic value system, and they teach the rest of us to remember its potential. So that's why it's important that we're here. It's not because of us as individuals, but there's a greater narrative of healing embodied in the DNA of this music.
Man, I grew up with Joe Siegel in the Jazz Showcase in Chicago, and Joe Siegel always had this saying, bebop is the music of the future. To hear you talk, Stefan, the way the music regenerates itself, the way it brings people together, I believe there's some truth in that. Nikki.
I just want to say one quick thing, just to add on to Stefan, is that what happens in the university is that what you're saying, Stefan, about the music and about the power of it, is that this might be one of the only things in the university that has a Black standard of excellence, where everything else, all these other disciplines are focused on this European white male centric thing. And then so we turn everything inside out at the university with what we're doing, because it's a completely different way of looking at the world. And like you said, it's a model for understanding each other. It's a model for collaboration and understanding that if the university could really look at it, and it could be a model to change a lot of the other disciplines. But that's why we have the friction, and that's why it can be challenging, you know, for us in these positions. But it's a power. And looking at it from that place of power, I think is really wonderful, the way that you said that.
And Nicole, let me add, you answered the question. That's why it's important for you guys to be there. That just was summed up with what you said. Another question, anybody can jump in. What are your students like? What changes are you seeing in the students that are coming into your programs, as well as jazz study programs across the country? Mr. Phillips?
Yeah, I'll go on this one. You know, we are really wrestling with kind of a unique battle where I'm at, in that we are having to grow a new and reimagined culture surrounding the music and how it's studied and how it's presented at our school. It's been what it's been for a very long time, and what it is that I feel needs to be most central to that experience is something very different than what it has traditionally been. And so in addition to the content we're dealing with, we literally have to home grow a new sense of cultural comprehension and how the music connects with culture in the first place from the ground up. So therein lies we have a bit of an added challenge in our equation, in our mix. However, the important thing is that we are trying to get our students, here's a quick way of putting this. We are getting away from the what of jazz and getting into the how and why. The what is this hyperfixation on curricular bits that are really commonly put forward and, you know what I mean, easy to evaluate. The why and the how comes from a very different place. That's not quite as tangible, but absolutely central to the very DNA, the very spirit of what makes the music the music. And so that's where our mind is. We're trying to shift so that we are, of course, acknowledging the what, because that's a part of what we do, but it's not the epicenter of the jazz universe either. And the Academy likes to make that the epicenter of its universe. And so we have a value system that's being implanted in a very large number of students coming through this system that clings to that, values that, prizes that, aspires to that, aspires to impress others with that, as opposed to, as Stefon so eloquently put, unearthing the them, getting past all the stuff they've wrapped themselves in and getting down to the nitty gritty of the essence of who they are as individual, creative, free-thinking musicians. And that means you got to be part philosopher, part psychologist, part psychiatrist, part parent, part friend, part counselor, part, parent sometimes. You know what I mean? You have to be all these things, but that's the beautiful part about what we do. And I think if it's what we do is fused to the African-American music experience, it forces you to have to be and grapple with all those things. So now you're not just evolving as a musician, you're actually evolving as a human being who's now ready to be in a position to speak truth to people in a way that transcends all the other garbage. Whether you know theory or not, whether you are old or young, or whether you've had jazz experience or you haven't, it transcends all that and it gets to the humanity of it all. Then we're speaking on a plane that is in common amongst all mankind, not just other people who have the same training as us. I think that's our biggest pitfall, but I'll stop there.
That was kind of what Stefon was saying in another kind of way. Anybody else want to tackle that? I'll give the question again. What are your students like? What changes are you seeing in the students that are coming into your program, as well as jazz studies programs across the country?
I think one of the unique challenges we have now, and Damani, thank you so much for how eloquently you put that. But you're speaking about the tools, and us valuing the tools more so than we're valuing the art or what we're creating with the tools. And what I see a lot of times now, man, students have use of tools. I see students with the ability to play things on their instrument that, I wish I was there. I was working with the NYO Jazz Orchestra, and listening to those kids. I said to one of our other colleagues, Etienne Charles, I said, man, I wish I was playing something like that when I was their age. Etienne said, man, I wish I was playing something like that now, right? There's a lot of ability, but that connection between the ability and saying something and the art that you're trying to create, I think that's what both you, Damani, and Stefan are talking about. You know, I've been telling the students, we can teach you how to develop your voice. We can't teach you about what to say. And the what to say is the more important thing about our art form. How we use it is the more important thing about our art form. So we don't want a lot of what my wife would call, she doesn't refer to functional illiterates. She calls them dysfunctional literates. You know, we don't want to create any more dysfunctional literates who have all of these tools, but no idea about, you know, what is art? What are we actually doing here to connect to the human experience?
Mr. Thomas, we only got a few more minutes. I mean, boy, but we could go on. And your points get me to something I really wanted to ask and talk about. I remember Phil Woods, man. Phil Woods, if anybody knew him, you know, he's funny as hell. But Phil Woods used to say things like, man, all these educators teaching all these kids about Charlie Parker and everything, and then they have to go out and play Britney Spears, okay? That's one thing, okay? And then I just had a talk just yesterday with Monty Alexander, talking about, you know, and Monty came up playing with Ray Brown and that Oscar Peterson circuit, just hitting the road and just playing and just swinging and dealing with the audience. Monty, too, was complaining, how are kids gonna get that? Where's Art Blakey and you know, the traveling university of jazz musicians? Can you guys teach that in a school? Anybody?
I don't think it's our job to teach that. I mean, fundamentally, artists have to get past this idea that we're so special. We're not so special. We have an obligation to be of service, just like a chauffeur, just like a cook, a politician. So the question becomes, what is the value that you're offering to society? And I think, given what's happening in the world right now, the primary value, as has been the case for centuries, is in your ability to amplify the voices of your community. Most people don't have the tools to sing their truth, but we'll never get to a holistic understanding of who we are as a species unless we understand all the small parts. What great artists can do is they can have a vision of clarity and unique ways of expressing that which already exists. It's not because they're so unique, it's that they're visionaries, and visionary is the right word because it's connected to sight. A great artist is someone who's incredibly perceptive, someone who can hear, someone who can see, and then articulate that which they see. So if you're going down a path of you got a bunch of tools and it's some crazy idea in your head, that might be great during times of luxury historically, where people have lots of money and free time and they want to go out and watch someone else do what they do. But right now, people are suffering. People are looking to have their pain healed. And one of the ways that you can heal what's happening inside of you is to make sure that it's being voiced and being heard. That's one of the things that we can do. If you provide a service like that, you'll be just fine.
Wow. Anybody else? Any other opinions?
I just want to give a shout out to Terry Lynn Carrington, like all the work that she's done in jazz and gender justice, and me being here, like being the only body like this in the room, just wanting to acknowledge the other women out there that are doing this work, and that's part of like our journey in this time is like, you know, developing more, opening the space and allowing for us to really collaborate with like our, I don't have the words for it, but like for us to really connect and collaborate. I know Jerry Allen, was in this position a lot, and she handled it very graciously. It's a challenge. It's part of the journey. I'm a band leader. I've played in lots of other people's ensembles, and I just encourage all of you who are, all of you all are band leaders, and just to like make space. I just wanted to put that in there in the conversation before we end. So yeah.
Well, Nikki, I've been working with Terry Lynn a lot over the last 5 or 6 weeks, and there's so many inherent things that we don't even know as men, as educators, as musicians, things we don't even know that women have to deal with that we don't even think about. And now it's like one reason we need more women is for people like me and for other people to realize that, to make it possible for more to come. And besides Terry Lynn, I love your story, Nikki. Who was the woman who inspired you in Chicago?
Roxanne Stevenson. She teaches at Chicago State University. She was teaching there when I was still getting my undergrad degree. And she still looks exactly the same. Still gorgeous. Yeah, Roxanne Stevenson, and she brought a lot of educators into the Chicago public schools teaching music, teaching jazz.
Well, in your journey, what are some of the things that we may not see that a woman has to deal with in dealing with an institution with jazz music?
I think people think it's enough to have one woman, but actually we need more critical mass. Once you have that, you have a lot more humor, you have a lot more fun. You know what I mean? Because then now you've got the feng shui, you got the vibe that can really move between those energies. And so I think we're making some progress, but honestly, it's not about editing what you say or anything like that. It's just about, like I said, making space for honesty and genuine collaboration. And when you're teaching, of course, encouraging the girls in your class, girls or women, depending on the age that you're working with. I noticed when I was going as a teaching artist into high school jazz programs that the directors often didn't encourage the girls to improvise, but they would encourage the boys even if they didn't know what they were doing. And that, it's like a silent impact that makes the girls feel that maybe this isn't for me, or maybe I'm not good. It's the silence that sometimes is more destructive than actually saying something. So I would be careful with that, making sure to encourage and be verbal and be vocal. I think that's
but that's kind of what I was trying to say from dealing with Terry Lynn over the last 6 weeks. It's inherent things that we won't even think about, Nikki, unless we're enlightened, for lack of a better word. I mean, people, guys, even women, may not think about doing those things without the steady reinforcement, which I'm glad to see. And Mr. Thomas, you want to say something?
Yeah, this is a great question, a great topic, but if these powerful women are in the space, we don't always have to think about it. I mean, that's how voices get left out of the conversation, is because we just haven't even had them in the space. We need to normalize that being the space that we have. So we who are in positions to do something about that, we may not be able to do anything about hiring until you have a position to come open. But we do have choices that we can make in terms of guest artists, in terms of material that we do. So some of the last folks I've been very intentional about having in, Tanya Darby, I got to have you in as a guest in my program. Camille Thurman, I got to have you in as a guest in my program. I have been doing, I have a colleague who is very much involved with Melba Liston's music. So he's purposeful about, okay, we need to program that and we need to teach that and we need to study that. I've been doing an interview series for our NYO Jazz program, and the whole launching point was we've got all these wonderful female great artists. We need to allow them the space. And so let's set up an interview series. I didn't want to be the one doing the interview. They just had me do it. But where I've had on Erica Von Kleist, and I've talked to Lauren Sevian on there, or I've had on Shami Royston, and I've talked to a young up-and-coming young lady that you all need to definitely check out, Summer Camargo. She's so bad, young trumpet player. But we just need to normalize that being our space.
Well, folks, let me let Stefan say something, then I'll wrap. Go ahead, Stefan.
I'll be brief. This is one of those things where I'm big on a value proposition. I don't think anyone owes us anything, right? I think we have to understand the big picture of why it's important. And when I think about how silly we are as a species, that we've used half of our intelligence throughout most of our existence, this art form is absolutely incomplete without women. It's not about diversity. If this is ultimately about amplifying the voices of our community, you're only hearing from half the community. It makes no sense at all. And to create these narrow perspectives of what the music should be is also silly. This is about someone expressing their authentic perspective. So I think we have a long way to go, but I don't see it as a difficult road. I see it as one of those, just open your eyes. I mean, my goodness, we're only hearing from half of our community right now, and it's really sad.
Well, Stefan, again, from being influenced by Terry Lynn, we as men, and again, as women, we can have our eyes open and still not see it. I'm glad Nicole brought her name up, because if any of you guys could investigate what they're doing with the Institute of Jazz and Gender Justice, you'll get what I mean. I go through it on the radio once or twice a week when I realize, that it's a learning process for us all. It's our society, and we just got to be more woke, And in jazz, same thing.
And they have a book coming out pretty soon, a book of all compositions by jazz women composers. So it can be some teacher material.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Folks, thank you very much. Hour and a half, and like I said, there's so many things we could have talked about, reached out on. I really appreciate the time and the Jazz Institute of Chicago for bringing us all together for this important conversation that you guys, when I worked at Jazz at Lincoln Center, I love that you guys have, what did they have where all the band teachers come together for a lot of conferences. I guess you guys do that across the country all the time.
Band Director Academy.
Yeah, band director conferences. I love that you guys do that, and some of these topics we brought up, you guys, I hope you spread that through those too. Heather, would you like to finish off? Heather, I guess not. Oh, here she goes.
Here she goes.
Hi, I was not to come back on, but I am certainly happy to be here. I just put in the private chat just to the panelists, thank you all. This was an amazingly powerful conversation. I was both taking notes and chatting with folks at the same time, because there was seriously some gems in there. And again, beyond that, I just want to speak on behalf of the world to say we are grateful to all for the work that you do, whether in the world, and of course your talent. So thank you all. Thank you, Mark, for your incredible moderation and for pulling all of this out of everyone. Thank you all. Thank you to our audience for being here, and we wish you all the best. Stay safe, mask up, wash your hands, and listen to some great jazz tonight. Take
Thank
care,
you.
everybody.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.